Hello, everyone. Welcome you all to the 2021 edition of the MBA Spotlight by GMAT Club. I am Chirag. I am the moderator for today's session. We welcome you to the 2021 edition, given that 2020 edition was a great success. We have Wharton once again kicking us off in this edition. And today I have with me Jake and David, who will be taking us through what this year's MBA cycle is going to look like, and later answer some of the questions. But just to add a brief about what MBA Spotlight is all about, we have over 25 MBA Adcom live Q&A sessions. We have some Zoom Q&A breakouts, student panels, profile evaluations with admissions consultants, and industry panels as well. So it looks like 3 action-packed weeks for all of you. To kick us off today, welcome Jake and welcome David. Why don't you take it away, give us an introduction, and take us through the presentation.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Chirag. And quickly, I just want to thank the GMAT Club for allowing us to be part of this, for hosting such a great session. For all of you, the people watching this and just starting to get your foothold as you prepare for the MBA application process and search process, resources like this, I think, are so valuable. So again, thank you to the GMAT Club, Chirag, for this opportunity. My name is Jake Kohler. I'm the director of the Moelis Advanced Access Program with the Wharton MBA Admissions Office and a member of the admissions committee for all of our rounds as well. And I'm really thrilled to be joined and to partner today with David Wang, who I'll allow to introduce himself.
Thanks, Jake. So my name's David. I'm currently, starting or ending my first year of my MBA experience here at Wharton. A little bit of background, I'm actually an international student coming from Toronto, Canada. Prior to Wharton, I primarily worked in the economic consulting industry, which I like to describe as just doing math for lawyers. And I'm currently an admissions fellow, so I'll be leading some TBDs and answering some of your questions today. So I'll let Jake kickstart this presentation.
Yeah. David, actually, do you mind sharing a little bit about some of the things you've been involved in your first year and what you're doing this summer for your internship? I know we'll touch on that later, but I think that information is so valuable at the Kickstart.
Yeah, so in first year, I actually joined quite a few clubs. I was part of the consulting club. I was part of tech club. I'm a big gamer, as you can tell by my headset and chair. So I was part of the esports and gaming club. And I think one of my favorite affinity groups was actually WAM, so the Wharton Asian American Association of MBAs. It's a pretty big mouthful. And this summer I'm working at Blizzard, which is a gaming company. They actually sent me this headset, and I'm doing analytics and strategy for them.
Awesome. Thank you. So what you can expect for the next 15, 20 minutes or so, David and I are going to talk a little bit about Wharton, really focus on some different themes of the program, and cover what we think is distinctive of the Wharton program. And then we'll transition into answering all the questions you have as you go through. And what we kickstart, I'm not going to read this quote by Dean Erica James, but I think having this mindset that the business school at Wharton and the experience that you have is preparing you for the leadership that comes not today or not a history of what happened in the past. It's preparing you for the leadership roles that are coming in the future. And that's why these 3 themes that David and I are going to talk about today: personalizing your MBA experience, something that we take a lot of pride in at Wharton. Being a student-led program and having student-led initiatives really drive a lot of what we do. Being a solutions-oriented student community is something we'll talk about. And we'll talk about the sense of community and how there's a shared ambition and belongingness in the Wharton community, both in Philadelphia as well as in the structures of the MBA program as well. We're not going to highlight specific facts and figures necessarily throughout this presentation. You'll see some slides that has that information, but if you want to learn more about those specific elements, check out our website, come to any of our Wharton events throughout this entire summer. We're going to go through all those nuanced pieces and things that we have. David and I really wanted to focus on what made Wharton a little bit different than its peers. And that's what the conversation for the next 15, 20 minutes will consist of. And what I'm going to kickstart with is the personalized curriculum. One of the things that Wharton prides itself on is this fact that when you enter while you do have a core curriculum, about 4 classes that every student takes, we call it the fixed core, and then some flexibility within the core, at least half of your curriculum is actually your selection of some of the courses, the skill sets, the major and electives that you want to identify with that are going to be useful skills for you. And before I ask David to talk a little bit about his major and some of the ways he's personalized his degree, I want to note that these 6 different gears that you see on the side next to business analytics, BEP, which is B's, operation, information, decisions, quantitative finance, and statistics, those are all STEM eligible majors. So about half our population has at least 2 majors during their MBA. If any one of these majors is part of your curriculum, then you would be eligible, at least on the Wharton MBA side, for that STEM OPT extension. So for any international students where that's of interest, those 6 years might be of interest to you as well. But David, I'd actually love to know some of what you've been studying, maybe a combination, not just your major, but like how you've navigated the curriculum, if you've decided about a major yet, because you do have until even your 4th semester to really figure that out. But I'd love to hear some of that experience.
Yeah, so I'm actually triple majoring, which
Wonderful.
somehow I made it work. So I'm majoring in entrepreneurship and innovation, operations, information and decisions, and then strategic management. And I think the reason why I've been able to make this work really goes back to that core principle of like Wharton's academic flexibility. So you've mentioned that we have our core courses, but a lot of electives. But what you didn't mention was that we also get to waive some of the core courses based on our past academic experience, professional, or even like designations. So personally, in undergrad, I studied math as well as business. So I've taken a lot of the core courses like statistics and even finance from my CFA charter. So I was actually able to waive a lot of the core courses, which unlocked even more credits for me to take the electives, which allowed me to do these 3 majors. Personally, my strategy for taking Wharton courses was explore more of the qualitative side. Prior to Wharton, I studied math. Economic consulting is also very quantitative. So I just wanted to kind of explore my weaker half, which is like the qualitative side. So I've taken courses like managerial decision making, which really lays out the framework of how do you think about problems, how to use nudges and these like soft strategies to influence people to make certain decisions. And I thought that those courses were very valuable in complementing my quantitative skill set.
I think that's so valuable to assess. One of the themes I hear a lot of times from you, I think you said it last week when we chatted, and other students who've gone through the MBA program, they talk about that aligning of your goals with the curriculum that you pursue to build out your skill set, not necessarily just to emphasize the singular piece. And I think similar themes like Lincoln, what's highlighted right now is some of the interdisciplinary programs. So David being you're a triple major, but there's also opportunities to have programs and take courses around the entire university, to utilize some of our specialized joint programs across the university, like the Lauder Institute, the Carey JD MBA, Healthcare Management Program. We have 15 other joint programs, both at Penn across different schools, as well as connected to a couple other partner schools around the country and world. But I also think that this aligning of your interests pairs well with the career management side and the successes that students have through that. We've created tools within the program that use data to help inform some of the processes that you might have. So you actually are seeing a screenshot right now of a program that's special to Wharton, can only be found here. We created it in-house called MAP. It stands for My Action Plan. And it actually allows that any student, let's say, Michelle in this example, though obviously neither of us are Michelle. It actually utilizes Michelle's background, has her pre-MBA industry and job function to help inform if she's to want to go into any other industry, she'd actually get some direct guidance relative to people who went from her pre-MBA industry into any specific post-MBA industry with steps and recommendations about how she might think about pursuing those couple years curricularly, extracurricularly, maybe even in an internship, and learning about the recruitment processes within each of those. So without going into all the detail and speaking high level, David, I don't know exactly how you landed at Blizzard for this summer internship, but if you don't mind chatting a little bit about the guidance you had in that recruitment process.
For sure. So honestly, coming into Wharton, I did not consider the gaming industry as a career path. And what really kickstarted that process was in the very first week, the Esports and Gaming Club hosted a coffee chat. And I just happened to have spoken to one of the co-presidents who's actually going to Activision Blizzard full time this year. And she introduced me to the gaming industry, telling me about all the cool stuff that's happening, how esports is growing in popularity, but how they're facing a very kind of lackluster monetization problem. And I thought, hey, I've been playing games since I was 6 or 7. Like, why have I never considered like working in gaming? And that's when I started doing more research, talking to more people in the industry. And what I found very valuable was actually through Warren's alumni network. I got to reach out to a lot of people that are in the gaming industry, and they were very receptive in just talking. I got to talk to somebody at Valve, which is this very dark horse, small gaming company that's 300 people, but they actually are essentially like the eBay of the gaming world, where they sell essentially every video game, and they have I guess the highest revenue per head count um, kind of metric within gaming and probably a lot of other industries as well. And as I figured that like gaming is such a lucrative industry, it like nobody really focuses on it and there's not much information on it. What I found very helpful was going to MAP and just learning about tech and media and entertainment, because those were the two kind of most closely tied industries to gaming. But on top of that, just even the clubs themselves, like the esports and gaming club, has a lot of career resources like that are specific to recruiting in a specific um, role or even industry that really helped me figure out how to navigate that recruiting process.
That's awesome. I actually think that that blends really well into that. I'm actually let's skip the student-led piece and think there's some other aspects of like the Wharton community and some of those clubs. So I'm going to toggle between some of these slides just so they show a visual. But I think what you just addressed as having this ecosystem of support and advisement between the clubs, career management, the alumni network, et cetera, that all helped lead and get to that point. Do you mind talking a little bit about that? Like the sense of community, how the community is involved. I know you talked about some of the involvements you have, but as we think about what the Wharton community and what that experience really is for an MBA student, do you mind sharing about that?
Yeah, I think the story that I'll tell is my experience actually visiting Wharton for the first time, and I think it's very representative of what my experience actually is once I came to Wharton. So when I first came, it was during my interview for the TBD, and what I found just so warm and nice was when I came, a second year reached out to me saying, "Hey, notice that you're from Toronto. Let me kind of show you around Philly." And she brought me into her home to show me what the typical kind of living situation would be here in Philly, to really demonstrate like this is what it would feel like to be an MBA here at Wharton. This is, the lifestyle. And then afterwards, she took me on a one-on-one lunch, and where she answered more questions, told me more about student life here at Wharton and academics, the career kind of progression, and even gave me some career advice. And I thought that was just taking that kind of like warmness and like community to the next level that I just didn't experience at any of the peer schools. And that was really what was the defining kind of decision criteria that ultimately made me choose Wharton.
Awesome. I think that's so powerful. And some of the other pieces, do you mind talking a little bit about like the engagement and the involvement beyond like the friendliness and the inclusivity that certainly is felt within the city of Philadelphia and how the students experience that? I would love for you to talk a little bit about that student leadership piece as well.
Yeah, I think in terms of community, I think there's honestly something for everyone. I'm just thinking back to all the smaller groups that I'm involved in that are like we have this group chat called Spooky Boo Crew, where we formed this like way back in September just because a group of us liked scary movies, and we started a group chat and we met up together in like smaller groups to watch these like horror films. There's also Spike Ball, which we just started this summer, where after work or even on the weekends, a group of us will just randomly message in the groups asking like, "Hey, who's down for Spike Ball?" And we'll meet in Rittenhouse Park just to play for an hour or two. And it's so regardless of whether it's sports, a shared passion for scary movies, or honestly anything, there are students that have similar interests and that will totally be down to just kind of like kick it together and share that hobby some more. In terms of the leadership, I think there's a lot of leadership outside of the McNulty leadership programs as well. I know Jay can probably talk more about that. But from a student experience perspective, like back in September when COVID, the pandemic was really just running rampant, there was a lot of pent up energy for different activities, and the students really led the initiatives on that front. There were students that organized small group dinners to just essentially start building that relationship with the class. There are students that organized smaller kind of trips. So here in Philly, there's I think it's called the Eastern Penitentiary. It's essentially this like jail, and we organize like smaller groups where we can go to this like penitentiary and kind of explore that area during Halloween when it was like very on brand and on theme. So it was really much a student built experience, even though there weren't any official like large group gatherings from the clubs or even going to class academically. The students really took the lead on recreating what we wanted the Wharton experience to be.
Yeah, I think that brings up such an important point around the student community, and I think it's because of the students who are there, but I think it's empowered by the administration around students being solutions oriented. So it's the students feeling like they have a say in not only their own experience, but how the direction of the program operates and grows. And that's certainly like, I like when we can show these figures like 24 student-led clubs and 130 student clubs. But the reality is, like David, your experience, what you shared about the student-led initiatives otherwise is actually the most empowering and important piece. One other note just about Eastern State Penitentiary, which you were referencing, it's a former penitentiary, now a museum. But it's like a storied penitentiary that now has this museum feel. I think assuming I'm not confusing my fictional and real like criminals, but I think Al Capone was there for a period of time. There's some really interesting pieces, and they do some really special pieces. So I'm thrilled that the students, especially last year, were able to use that as one of these open air safe spaces to build part of the community that they were seeking. Mm-hmm. The only other piece before we get to some of the application tips that I want to make sure I hit home as well has a little bit to do with that like sense of teamwork, collaboration, and shared ambition. I know you shared this earlier as well, but I think it's really important to think about. I hear commonly from current MBA students that they were concerned that Wharton was going to be this competitive place, and they hear it's competitive, and that is not untrue. But competition can take a couple different ways, and the sentiment that I hear time and time again is this idea of shared ambition, that even though the people are ambitious and they're seeking to do great things, they're competitive internally, they also want to help everybody around them reach those goals. So no goal is cutthroat from somebody else's achievement. It's all built upon how can we all get there together? How can we rise all ships at the same time? And I'm curious if you have any thoughts around that sort of notion, around that sort of a collective intensity and ambition with one another.
Yeah, for sure. I think we definitely see this kind of collective ambition on two fronts, academically and then from a career perspective. So academically, like Wharton's program puts us into learning teams of 6 students. And I think it really just starts there, where we essentially start the year off with a tight-knit group of 6. And, within my learning team, we have a veteran who was actually a fighter jet pilot. He was the only person that was qualified to teach people how to land fighter jets on an aircraft carrier. So he came into Wharton with a lot of leadership experience, but not as much of the typical business experience like finance, right? And in our first week, we had to go through preterm, and he took on the role of being the CFO of our simulated team. So within that role, he felt like, oh, this was not very not something that I'm like really good at. Like, how can I excel? And people from my learning team, as well as myself, we really supported him because we had that finance background. And that kind of speaks to our shared goal of succeeding as a team and really complementing and helping each other in roles where you might not be as comfortable in. But looking into just academic classes beyond the learning team, what I found is that in challenging classes, a lot of the time students will reach out to each other and form groups to work on assignments together, to work on big projects together, and to bounce ideas off of each other to really help each other succeed within that class. And that kind of dynamic is also echoed on the career side. I think when people think of careers, they think that's the real game. That's where it matters, and that's where the competitiveness might actually seep out. Whereas with grade non-disclosure, many students might think, oh, like it doesn't matter anyway. But that shared ambition is equally seen on the career front. So within a lot of career paths like VC and PE, and even like consulting and banking, like it's very competitive. Many of the firms only hire like a few number of students for their internships. So you would imagine that many students might step on each other to try to secure that slot. But what I've seen and what I've experienced is actually completely the opposite. I actually participated in consulting recruiting. So what I found is that all of the students that wanted to participate in consulting recruiting, they formed a really big WhatsApp group of like 120, 200 students. And every day, almost every hour, there was somebody asking like, does anyone want to do a case? Does anyone want to practice some behaviorals? And there's always another student that will say like, yeah, I'm down to do a case right now. Or yeah, let's do some behaviorals right now. So everybody's helping everyone else to get to their career goals. And there's really no competition within the Wharton group. I think when we think about competitiveness, the way we think about it is Wharton against the other schools. So in that sense, we're really supporting each other to compete against the other schools and try to like, lock up as many internship slots for us as compared to like our peers.
That's awesome. So we talked a lot of you. I think there's so many great insights. And David, I'm thrilled that you're an admissions fellow where people will be able to be in touch with you throughout this year and learn from your insights. I'm going to transition quickly, just keeping mindful of time, wanting to make sure that we answer some questions later. I want to hit some application tips and some insights at this point, and then we'll move into question and answer. So the deadlines that you see up on the screen right now are our deadlines for the upcoming year. So if you're a full-time professional looking to apply, enter in the fall of 2022. You'll apply in round 1, round 2, or round 3 of this upcoming year. Those dates are there. If any of you are current undergraduate students or full-time master's students interested in the deferred admissions program at Wharton, that's the Moelis Advanced Access Program, that deadline's April 27th of next year as well. And just in terms of like our timeline and what happens, you're responsible with submitting your application materials, and you see an asterisk there by that deadline date. That asterisk is actually an indication that it's the materials that you have direct control over. So we do ask and recommend that you try to get your recommenders to submit by that date. But if you get all of your materials in by, let's say, apply in round 1, September 8th, 2021, and your recommender submits September 9th, your application will still be considered complete. So again, materials that you have direct control over are due by that deadline date. Hopefully everything by that date as well, but there's a little bit of leeway for those recommenders. Then the admissions committee meets and we review all applications. We'll discuss, make our decisions, and invite a certain number of applicants to interview. And then after those interviews, we actually look at all the applications again with the interview information, and we look at all that information together before making that final decision. So I frame it that way just so you know, as applicants or potential applicants, that the interview is not just a binary part of our process. It's not like you've made it past that application stage and then you just need to make it past the interview stage. We're looking at all that information together because it's part of the way we see all aspects of your ability to achieve in our program. This slide is a new take of how I wanted to demonstrate the different materials of your application. And I've emphasized that there's really 3 buckets of information we're trying to learn about you as a prospective candidate. How you're going to achieve in the Wharton MBA classroom, and we learn that through your transcripts, test scores, your resume, and recommendations. How you're going to be engaging within the Wharton community, that MBA community that David spoke so much about. And we learn that through extracurricular involvement, maybe service involvements or other responsibilities you've had, but as well as your resume recommendations. And our second essay prompt is focused on the community. And then we also want to learn about how you're going to achieve throughout your career. And we learn that through your resume, professional experience, recommendations, and essay. And I wanted to highlight it this way because I think it's really important to see that there's multiple parts of your application that speak to all of these different components. So it's not just a linear formation. We're not grading your background. In fact, our office does the opposite. We have this read to admit philosophy where we want to see what are the reasons across these different documents, materials, things that we consider about you. What are the reasons that you should be admitted? And nobody is perfect through this process. Everybody has these different backgrounds and experiences that they may be more proud of or less proud of. And we want to see, why should this person be here? And if you think through it in that way yourself, demonstration of how you're going to achieve based on the strengths you have, without dismissing the things that maybe are softer, but then using those pieces of software to demonstrate why the MBA might matter for you in that way, that's going to help you as you move forward. Again, our office's philosophy is we want to read every application with the intent to admit that candidate. And that's how we navigate the entire process. And we want you to have that confidence and feel empowered to apply if you're interested in Wharton, if you see that alignment to our program, to know that we're going to see you in the light of, these are the reasons why this individual should be in our community. Before we get to your questions, I just want to throw a couple tips that I have beyond what I just shared. First is just confirming when you go through your application, you have your resume, a couple different documents, and as well as information that should be confirmed for accuracy in your application form itself. So dates in your resume and on your application should look very similar, if not identical. And that's just a quick way. It's a very small way of demonstrating that you've taken this process seriously and it doesn't raise any questions. The second point that I have here is related to essay prompts. I know that every school, there's a little bit of similarity thematically with many of the prompts, but we frame things in different ways. And I encourage you to first identify the intent of any prompt being asked of you, and then respond specifically to that prompt. And that might not always give you the space to share everything that you wanted to, because there might be a narrow focus or a very broad focus in different responses, but use other parts of an application process, whether additional information sections or interviews and conversational pieces, to then share those other pieces that you might not have been able to share in an essay because the prompt was narrow and focused, but you think is important for us to be able to know of. The third point there, demonstrate skills in your ability to analyze, communicate, collaborate, and lead are really helpful. So within your resume and other aspects, learning how you can do those 4 different things, analyze, communicate, collaborate, and lead, are really powerful demonstrations for the future. I know there's different roles too, and this fourth idea, when leadership isn't evident, so maybe you don't have a leadership role per se, that's not your fault to maybe be in an organization or a company that doesn't give leadership titles to pre-MBA employees. But you can still demonstrate leadership and think of it as demonstration of responsibility and impact. And those are great ways to be able to emphasize that you are going to be able to lead in the future, have that future aspect. And then the last tip that I have, and this comes from a decade in highly selective admissions, there's this constant sense of where a prospect will ask me, how can I show that I fit in your community? And I think that's the wrong way to think about this process. You're in the driver's seat more than you actually anticipate, than you might believe as a prospective candidate and as an applicant to one of these programs. So I'd rather you think of it from where you stand, and you're better off focusing on demonstrating how a program is aligned to who you are based on your background and your interests, and not about how you should fit into that program. These things aren't counter to one another, but it's the locus of control within it. And I want you to own and feel accountable to being the individual who can share why a program is aligned to you and not anything other than that. So with that said, I'm now going to have on the backdrop just ways that you can stay connected to our team. David's going to be one of our admissions fellows next year. So there's actually a link on our website if you were to Google search or just your preferred search browser. Admissions Fellows Wharton. David's going to be one of the 50 plus names that you'd be able to find to talk to current students, learn about their experiences, which I know are so valuable. But you can always look at us on social media, email, website, etc. With all that said, I'm going to stop talking for a little bit. Chirag, I would love to know some of the questions that are up, and between David and I, we'll do our best to answer them.
Awesome. Thanks, Jake, and thanks, David. The presentation, I hope, was really helpful and informative for all the students out here. And with David throwing in insights from a student's point of view. We do have some questions sourced in from before, so I'm going to start with that. But I'd also like to inform that you can ask questions in the live chat. We have Jennifer answering some of the questions as well. But we're going to take some questions that are going to be relevant for all the people as a group and not profile-specific questions. So jumping right in, Jake, you ended with the read to admit policy, and you told us about how applications are evaluated and what you basically look for it. There's a question that is a slight tilt to that asks, what items in a candidature does Wharton perceive as a deal breaker?
Yeah, this is a great question. There are very few things that might be a deal breaker. I will say blatant dishonesty. So if there's very clearly a couple different spaces of an application that just don't align at all, and there's an evidence of dishonesty in the application process, which almost never happen. I think in many years I've seen an instance of it maybe once. But that's a deal breaker. Other than that, though, there are no deal breakers. So maybe I'll try to give some specifics that I think come up sometimes, where somebody's like, my GMAT score, my GRE score is X. Is that a deal breaker? And there has never been a conversation in our office where the answer to that would have been yes. When somebody's maybe a test score is a little bit softer, we then look what are the parts of their collegiate academic record and their resume that demonstrate that they are able to achieve in maybe one of those different sections. And there's multiple ways like that. So very rarely are there deal breakers. And if you're this engaged in this process, my guess is you're not actually going to be in a position where there is a deal breaker.
Fantastic. I think that's helpful. The next question is a classic one, and it's between round 1 and round 2. So is there a significant difference with respect to the chance of acceptance between applying in round 1 and round 2?
Yeah, another great question. For the Wharton MBA program, the answer to that is no. If you apply in round 1 or round 2, the chances of admission, the quality of the application pool, the opportunities for funding as well, which I know isn't part of this question, but I'll just add, are almost identical. They're very, very similar. There's no distinguishable difference between round 1 and round 2 for us. What I will say is, if you're applying for regular admissions, round 3 is the year where year to year there's some variance. And that's because it's not exactly 50-50, but we intend to admit and enroll about half of our class in round 1, about half our class in round 2. And then depending on what happens throughout that year and changes in the market that lead to enrollments not meeting that goal, influences our round 3 number. So we can get our full class. So round 3 is always subject to the outcomes of other pieces. Round 1, round 2, nearly identical.
Right. And as a follow-up question, is it true that the majority of scholarship dollars are awarded to R1 applicants?
Yeah, it is not true. False.
That's great. The next question is an online versus offline GMAT and whether the admissions committee has any preference.
Yeah, we do not have a preference, especially in this past year. And I want to look like as best as I'm looking all of you in the eyeball right now and telling you, like, we take in this process. We want to see this process from a place of humility and health consciousness. This past year, 18 months have been crazy, and the advent of the online GMAT or taking it not at a test center and at home was due to make sure that it was safe and effective for people to complete these tests, whether GMAT or GRE, any of those tests. We want you to feel healthy and comfortable when you complete the test. So do it in the environment that's best for you, and know that our team is going to not have a preference. We're going to take the information for what it is.
Perfect. I think that does set away some apprehensions that students have. The next question is around entrepreneurship and how will Wharton help us in nurturing our entrepreneurial mindset. I think it'll be brilliant if you can touch upon the San Francisco campus and what are the opportunities that they bring up.
Yeah, I appreciate that you expanded that too, to mention like semester in San Francisco. We also have a brand new center for entrepreneurship and innovation on campus, Tangen Hall, 70,000 square feet of new space, dedicated space for entrepreneurship, innovation. There's a test kitchen, maker spaces, maker labs, etc. But I actually think that I'm not the best person to discuss this. David, one of your majors is entrepreneurship and innovation. I would love for you to respond to this.
Yeah, so academically, we have a whole list of entrepreneurship courses. One of my favorite is Management 802. I can't remember the exact name of the course, but the course is essentially just a series of two major simulations. And one is a simulation where you are going to a moon near Saturn, and your team is trying to figure out all the pieces that you need to, do and make decisions in order to get there. And there's like a lot of roadblocks that come in the way. And then a second simulation is, I guess, a more traditional simulation where we're trying to design a product. We need to choose what market to enter. We need to actually make a pitch to an investor. We have to figure out how to negotiate with the investor to ultimately lock down a deal. And those are like very useful kind of exercises to go in preparing us for the entrepreneurship world. In terms of Tangen Hall, which you mentioned, I actually took a product design class, which is somewhat, I guess, in between a Wharton and a non-Wharton course, where in this class we started off learning how to draw like 2D things, then expanded to drawing 3D products, and then learn how to put that product into CAD. And then I actually got to 3D print out my product in Tangen Hall through their 3D printers. And then we also learned how to do beta and alpha prototypes, and ultimately came out with like a final prototype for our product. So you really got to experience the entire kind of, we'll call it supply chain or value chain of being an entrepreneur, from literally drawing out that 2D idea to creating that like final prototype that you're going to go out and try to do more market research on.
Awesome.
Great. Thanks for, yeah, please.
No, I was just going to say, like, those insights could not be more, there's no way I could have ever replicated the insight that came there. So David, thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So the next question is around the COVID experience. I think it's best that again David answers this. How has been your overall acad and collaboration experience in the COVID times during your MBA, and how have things changed for international students?
Okay, so I think honestly during COVID time, it's hard to benchmark against a non-COVID time just because I've never experienced the non-COVID Wharton experience. Hopefully second year will be like that. But in terms of overall academic and collaborative experience, I'm honestly like I have nothing to complain about. In terms of academics, I feel like the profs really learn how to use the technology, learn how to use Zoom very effectively, and they really want to like create the best possible academic experience. So they're integrating a lot of breakout rooms very very thoughtfully. It's not just like, oh, go to a breakout room and talk about what we just discussed in class. Profs will provide prompts as to how to structure your discussion during breakout rooms. And there's always like a takeaway that comes out of that. So I think it replicates in class experience like very well, if not even better, because in a breakout room, you no longer have the background noise of all the other groups discussing while you're live in a classroom. In terms of collaboration, I think students have really led that. Like I mentioned before, collaborating to work on assignments, collaborating to work on projects, and taking the initiative to create those groups to help each other out. In terms of the experience for international students, I think this is a challenging question because it's not really a Wharton specific question. It has to do
Right.
more with just the dynamic of, for example, the visa process, which has been very fluid recently. Even taking out loans, that's been honestly a big challenge recently because a lot of the loaners are choosing not to loan money to international students. But Wharton has been actually very helpful. They're negotiating with I guess lenders on our behalf and trying to secure a deal so that we're able to actually take out loans and fund the MBA.
Great. Thanks. So the next question is from Andrea, and it says, most of your students appear to pursue consulting, finance, and tech. Do you have students who pursue non-traditional areas such as media, entertainment, etc.?
Well, you are looking at David right now. So in addition to David, I'll quickly say that we have students that pursue numerous areas, like way beyond. We have people going into agribusiness, entrepreneurship, different types of entrepreneurship, maybe software as a service counts as part of tech. I can't quite tell based on the question, but we are far more than just consulting finance. We certainly have great strength there. Every year we're known as one of the top, producers of consultants at the top 4 consulting firms around the world. But if you were to go online, we actually are totally open in our career management website. If you were to look like Wharton MBA career management statistics, you would actually be able to see reports of internship and career statistics from every single class over the past few years. We're totally public in that. That's actual information for you all to be able to observe, but you will see non-traditional areas, whether it's in social impact or anything else as well. David, if there's anything else you want to share, I know I spoke to a high level of that.
Yeah, so I think on the employment report, I think that's what it's officially called. It might be by industry, but I'll just kind of give a few examples of internships that a few of my friends have taken. So I have a friend that's working at Rivian, which is, I guess, autonomous driving, electric vehicle type of company. I have a friend that's going to Pepsi to work on their marketing. I have a friend that's going to Packard, which is an autonomous kind of electric trucking company. So it really spans anything you can possibly think of. And these companies that are like non-traditional, like not in consulting, finance, or like tech, they're actually looking for Wharton MBAs because they need that leadership. They need people who can, bring some structure to how they want to approach their business strategically. So it's kind of like both ways, right? Like Wharton students go there, and then they're also seeking Wharton students.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Great. So I have some of the questions that are repeating. We don't have a lot of time left, so I'm just going to pop up one more question, and that is mostly around the applications. So it says, would we need to submit official transcripts and/or GMAT reports before our applications would be reviewed?
Yeah, great question. So in the application process itself, you do not need to submit an official transcript or official GMAT or testing reports. You can self-report that information for your transcript. You can have an unofficial copy sent to us at the time of your application. Then if you're admitted and enrolled, that is when we ask for official reports to be sent to us in both those areas, and then we verify the information afterwards for accuracy. So yeah, great. Easy question for me to land on. I'm glad David had the tough questions. And again, thank you all. This has been absolutely phenomenal. And I'm really appreciative of Jen Horvath as well, who's been answering a lot of your questions in the live chat between her, myself, David, any member of our team. We're excited. We want to respond to your questions throughout the coming months as you go through this process.
Absolutely. Thanks, David, and thanks, Jake. It's been a pleasure to hear from you about the Wharton program in particular, and specifically from David about how his year has been. We want to also tell the audience that we have a Wharton session, which is a 15 minutes video tip on application tips for Wharton by an admissions consultant, which will be coming right after this. And the next school that we're going to have is Columbia. So feel free to tune in at 8 a.m. Pacific time. And look forward to seeing you in the next sessions of the MBA Spotlight Fair. Thank you so much again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.